Hello and welcome back to the Soul Sisters podcast. Today I am joined with a beautiful guest, Claire. I met Claire at a Rising Tide networking event, and it was her energy. Before I even spoke to Claire, it was the energy in which she ricocheted out. She had this divine feminine presence of power, of authenticity. Before I even spoke to her, I knew that she was such a powerful woman. But obviously, behind such a powerful woman, there will be a beautiful story. And that's why I'm so excited to have Claire on the podcast today so that she can share her story, share her life experiences, and really get to know her a little bit better. So, Claire, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
How do I say anything after that? Thank you. It's such a joy, such a pleasure. And thank you. I will take all of those words.
You're so welcome. So, do you want to give the listeners a little bit of an intro of who you are, what you do, what you're about?
Okay, so I'm a mum of two boys. We'll start with that. Number one role in life. My boys are almost 14, almost 16. So they keep me busy at the hairdressers, covering the grey hair. I am from Galway. And I lived most of my life as a nurse. So I did 36 years nursing experience, started in Dublin in children's nursing. And when I moved into the north for a man, as you do, I went into A&E departments and I did 20 years in 4 different A&E departments in the north of Ireland. So I became an A&E nurse manager fairly quickly and taught in children's trauma courses. And my ex-husband is a church minister, so we moved around quite a bit. Which was very interesting and very good. And there was downsides to it as well, but I will say I was very privileged to be in people's lives that I wouldn't normally have had an opportunity to be. So I met amazing people and had my work life and my home life. So it was all very busy. We went through a journey of IVF and miscarriages. And then we went to a GP in Galway. And he did an American-based holistic treatment, and we now amazingly have our 2 boys, which is such a blessing. And I, about 9 years ago, decided that actually I was burnt out from A&E, as you can absolutely get. 20 years I was done managing the war zone. So I left A&E and became a respiratory practice nurse in a GP surgery. At the same time that I changed my job, I stepped out of my marriage. So we were married for 19 years and our boys were 4 and 6 at the time. And my whole world went upside down in the space of a few weeks. But sometimes we need everything to change in order for change to be possible or to be a better version of change. So over the next X amount of years, I navigated my divorce, my mum's death, my dad's dementia, all sorts of life happens in the middle of one thing. And a few years into GP practice, I thought, I'm liking it, but I'm not loving it with the passion I loved A&E. And I thought, I need to love my job. So I looked around and thought, what are my skills? What do I like? What am I good at? And I ended up looking at counselling courses and coaching courses. And here's the thing, my 11-year-old in the car one day must have been doing stuff in school. And he said to me, so, Mum, if you could do anything in the whole wide world, what would you do? I said, I don't know. I said, I might be a life coach. And he said, why? And I said, well, I think I'd like to help people become unstuck. And he just said, why don't you? Like you do when you're 11. So anyway, over time, I found a course to train to be a divorce coach. And I had never heard of that. But the person who was doing the coaching, the teaching, said, if you're a coach and you want to integrate this into your business, or if you've been through a divorce. And I thought, oh, postcard, t-shirt, got that one. That was a really awful journey. So what would this have brought to my journey if I'd heard about it? So I started that training. Then I did a diploma in divorce coaching. Then I did NLP and lots of other things. And got to a point when I was doing part-time nursing, part-time coaching, loving the coaching, not so much loving the respiratory nursing inhaler stuff, and thought, what am I going to do now? So anyway, I phoned a friend who suggested I write my resignation letter. So I did, went back to work, having been off sick with COVID, handed in my notice and left my 36-year nursing role 2.5 years ago, 3 years in June actually, to set up a business in Northern Ireland that nobody had ever heard of. But I knew that if I had had me 9 years ago, it would have changed my life. Mm-hmm. I couldn't go back and help me, but I can help other people. So I decided to give it a shot. And I'm still here, still doing what I love. And actually now I have clients all around the world, which is just astounding. It's like, how did that happen?
Because you have so much firm belief within yourself. And that's beautiful what you said there behind, although I cannot change what has happened to me in the past, I can help other people who are going through the same experience.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Because I bring all my hindsight, all my learning to let it be somebody else's foresight. I can avoid people falling into the emotional pitfalls that I fell into, every single one. And the thing is, every single time, it's like sometimes it takes a sledgehammer for me to see the obvious. So what I can do for people is go, let me show you the obvious straight away before you fall into the pits. And then we can figure out how we navigate them. So a lot of people thought I was just pro-divorce, which is not true. So I changed my title to relationship and divorce coach over a bit of time, because the area that I love the most is probably, are you in a should I go, should I stay? This relationship isn't working for me. What's wrong? What do I not know? Why am I stuck feeling it's not okay, but not knowing how to make any decision? And that's the bit that I love the most, because I help people see what they can't see by asking questions, which is what I love about coaching. But I also help people to be able to understand their world, because I believe in order to manage our emotions, we need to understand them. And when a relationship isn't working, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of mixed up emotions, and we go forward and backwards all the time. If we can see the patterns that underpin that, then we can make sense of it. Then the confusion drops away. Then we have the ability to look at the evidence, and then we're in a much better position to make a better decision about our future, whether it is to stay or go. It's interesting. Some people say to me, what's your success rate? So I always look at them and go, well, that depends on your definition of success. Some people's idea of success is, how many marriages do you save? My definition of success is when my client gets to choose to live a life that feels good and alive for them, whatever that happens to look like in their world. That is success to me.
I completely love that, and I feel that, and I completely also relate to what you have been saying, and I'm sure that there's someone listening to this right now that maybe is in that will I go, will I stay, will I go scenario. And if I would have had your advice, Claire, sooner on, I definitely wouldn't have been in that limbo for so long. So I don't know if you know this about me, but I this time last year, I was going through like the heartache of the breakup. I left my 9-year relationship, but the thing is, there actually underlying there was actually nothing wrong with the relationship. I just didn't know who I was. So this felt really scary for me to actually leave the relationship, because there wasn't any quote unquote like issues or problems. I was the problem, because I was like, I don't know who I am. It's very much codependent. And I needed to rip the band-aid right off for me personally to get to know
Wow.
who I am, to actually stand on my own 2 feet and really embody who I was. So maybe if there's someone listening to this right now that maybe the clients who you've been working with, if they're in that in-between stage, what would you say is something is practical for them to help clear the water? It's very muddy at the moment. How can we settle that water, make it clear?
The first thing that I always say is, without awareness, we can never have change. So start to notice your world. That's the biggest thing that I would say to anybody. Start to notice what's happening, what's going on. And the biggest thing that I talk about, something I never knew, when I was married, when I left my marriage, I didn't understand this. I never realized the value of understanding our energy. When we're with someone and we leave them, do we feel energized? Do we feel a bit down? Do we feel a bit frustrated? Do we feel a bit angry? What's going on? When we start to notice that, there are always patterns and dynamics that underpin every relationship. Always, no matter who you're in relationship with, your boss, your partner, your child, your parent, your brother, always. When we start to notice, we can start to see a pattern. It's kind of like if you're doing Weight Watchers. It's only when you write down what you're eating do you get anywhere with it. Because you start to notice what you're eating in a way that it becomes aware, you do something with it, you have an evidence pathway. Well, if I keep eating all of this, I'm not going to lose weight, right? Do I have a choice? So awareness, becoming aware of our world, is the single biggest thing that will allow change to happen. Because here's the deal, and you'll relate to this. If one person is not okay in a relationship, the relationship's not okay, regardless of what the other person says. But I love that you were brave enough to leave to find who you were, because this was always going to be something that would impact your relationship in a negative way, because you would always be trying to figure it out. And figuring it out when we're with somebody doesn't generally mean figuring it out, because it is still blurred with that sort of togetherness. So I admire you for that, because that's a big deal.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I will actually put it up there with one of my biggest achievements that I have achieved, like, throughout my whole life. And it's not leaving the relationship, but it's the person who I become after that. And I don't think that you can put a price tag on that. I don't think that you can have a card or a certificate and say, this is what I've achieved. It's an internal job.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what
but the internal jobs,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
The internal jobs, when we trust our gut to do something, are the things that stamp something into our sense of self that we take forward with us then, and we go, okay, so I'm good at making decisions, right? So the next time you come to making a decision, you have something to stand on to go, if I'm good at making decisions, what do I feel would be in my best interest right now? I'm not a lover of the words right and wrong. And I hear people use them all the time, well, I don't want to make the wrong decision. I don't want to make the right decision. I think they are weighted with responsibility that comes from our family, from our culture, from our genetics, all of this stuff, the environment that we're in, and we're trying to get it right. But who says what right is? So I prefer to use the phrase, what is in my best interest? Because decisions can be changed. And if you decide to take a job and after 6 months you don't love it, well, that's okay. You can decide, do I want to stay in it until I get something else? Do I want to leave? But we have choices that we don't often realize that are there, because sometimes we think it's all or nothing. And I'm always about what's possible if we make this decision and what's possible if we go here. But right and wrong as a concept tend to keep us stuck.
Absolutely. And sometimes when it comes to them decisions, we're asking maybe the wrong people for the advice.
Well, we talk about it to quite a few people. And so what I know in my journey and with my clients, when we overshare and we talk to a lot of people, we get more confused. Because so my logo, which is on the wall behind me, is Your Story Matters. And I chose that purposely because we live our life, which is a story, in amongst the stories of everybody else around us. And if we are able to separate out from other people's stories to find out how do we want to author our own, that's when we find space to do it. So when we ask lots of people what they think or what would they do if they were us, they're not us. They don't have a background that's the same as ours. Their opinion is different because they're not looking at it through our lens. So we can actually muddy our waters far more. That doesn't provide a space that is safe with no judgment for us to figure things out, which is one of the things I provide for clients. So I always say, pretend your head is like a handbag and just fire it out on the table, everything that's in there, and we'll figure it out as we go. And having worked in A&E, I know how to prioritize and organize because it's what I did in my career world. But it's the same thing with our thoughts and the things that need our attention. But it does come back to this idea that when we talk to a lot of people, it makes our heads noisier, not quieter. It doesn't really help a lot of the time.
Absolutely. It doesn't help. I completely agree with you. And I think that's a pattern in which I had definitely fell on before in the past. And it wasn't until really I started working with a one-to-one coach or I started working with a therapist that someone was basically that space holder, like basically being like, but what is it that you want? And they weren't giving me their beliefs or their fears or anything like that. They were asking me, but what truly do you want? If there was, if nothing else existed, what is it that you want? And I feel like that's such an important part, especially for women, because we have all of these societal expectations of who we quote unquote should be, should do, all of these things. And it's so noisy.
Yeah. And I love, what you were saying there about, when you're talking to people and, their opinions and things, because actually what happens is their fears outwork in how they offer advice. And their fears are grounded on their experience of life. And we can borrow beliefs. I'm all about whose voice is that? So when somebody says something to me, I'll very often go, that's an interesting statement. Whose voice do you think that might be? Because I don't think that's yours. And it's the borrowed fears, the borrowed beliefs that we have from other people. And I'm all about, well, let's hand them back to that person because that's their story, it's their life, it's their lived experience. But if you didn't have that in your world, what then might be possible for you? Because to ask yourself what you want when you've never really done it, that's like looking into this great big black hole. Well, I certainly had no idea what I wanted. So I started slightly differently. I started with what I didn't want. I started writing out a list of things and what do I not want? What's not working for me? And that allowed me to have a launch pad to then pivot a bit and go, okay, so if this isn't working for me, what might I like? Because the what did I need or want, that was too far away from the world I was living in.
Mhm.
I just knew my marriage had ended. I had then, when I went and left my job as a nurse, there was lots of things that I didn't know what was possible. So figuring out what I didn't want for me was a safer platform to find the ground beneath my feet to then move forward.
Yeah, to create space to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That is beautiful. And what would you say has been the biggest challenge along all of this? Like, you've navigated a lot of life change, like everywhere, every part of your life. So what would you say has been the biggest challenge?
So from a business perspective, the biggest challenge was nobody in Northern Ireland had ever heard of a divorce coach. So it wasn't a concept that anybody looked for to see what it would be, because they didn't know to look it up. So one of my biggest challenges in setting up the business that I set up was getting awareness out there. Who am I? What does a divorce coach do? Even my friends still, like 3 years in, would say to me, how's the counseling going? And I'm like, no, you're still doing that. Because it's so different. Coaching is so forward movement and forward paced and look to the future. So from a business perspective, that will have been my biggest obstacle. From a personal perspective, I think it has been figuring out how to trust my ability to make decisions that feel right and aligned at the time to get to the next step, and not looking too far ahead. Because in anything in life, when we look too far ahead, we don't live in the now. And actually, that doesn't help us, because fear comes in. So we either live in regrets if we look at the past, or fear if we look at the future. And keeping myself here and putting myself around people. So when I was nursing, the nurses and doctors I worked with, they didn't want me to leave. So they were great people, but they weren't who I needed for my next part of my journey. And when I decided to leave nursing, I thought I need to put myself around people. So I joined a business training in England, and I flew over once a month with another business owner in Northern Ireland for in-person training. And then we did lots of online stuff. I was in a WhatsApp group. So I put myself around people who saw in me what I didn't see. And that learning of having to shift and change the environment I was in and have the confidence to do it, those were all things that I had to kind of get out of my own way. I'm becoming a bit of an expert in getting out of my own way now. I think as humans, we always probably are our own worst enemies for things, but we can recognize things faster. And I'm all about, don't beat yourself over the head. Just congratulate yourself that you recognized it, because then you can do something with it.
Yes, bringing it into your awareness and then changing the pattern. And it's absolutely beautiful what you said there about putting yourself into the right rooms and well, rooms that align with you, and being around people who are allowing you to shine your light and really want you to shine your light. I think that's such an important part of business, of self-development, of whatever you want to call it, because if you're not in the rooms like that, it's very hard for you to almost like step into the next chapter sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I talk quite a bit in my posts on social media about, what room are you in? What room do you choose to go in? Because as a business owner, you will know there's lots of rooms you can be in, because there's lots of stuff on. But then you spread yourself too thin and you actually don't do anything well. So I'm very careful about what rooms do I choose to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I chose to be in something where we ended up in the same room.
Yeah.
And here we are at podcast. So it is that thing of what rooms are going to help me for my next journey, for me as a person, because there's a saying that I love, and it is, it's more important who we are when we walk into a room than what we do when we're actually in the room. And so much of life is about, what do we do? What are we producing? What are we making? What are we doing? What can we show for it? What's the productivity level? I am far more about, who are you? Who am I? Because I bring me to my clients. Whether I have a book written or not, or lots of different things, doesn't really matter to the client in front of me. If I'm distracted, then I'm not helping them. So who I am is more important.
Mm-hmm. And such a big question, but how do you figure out who you are?
I think time, and I think listening to people that you trust. So, I put myself around people that see stuff in me that I don't see. And then I think, okay, so you see this in me, right? Okay, so what do I Do I see it? Do I like it? What do I choose to do with it? So lots more questions come up. And over time, I know that I have changed too. So when I look back at who I was when I was married, so here's an interesting thing. When I was setting up the business, I had left my marriage, the divorce was done, all that sorted, and our kids go between the two of us, so it's all fine. But I needed a name for the business. And I looked and I thought, now, do I go for something like Thrive or North Star or pick a name? And I did all of that. Nothing felt good. Then I thought, well, what about my name? And I thought, I didn't really like who I was when I was married. So there was an interesting thing about that name. But also, I never loved my maiden name when I was growing up because it's Auchmuty. Most people can't spell it, say it, pronounce it, or remember it. So for me, it was associated with embarrassment. So it took about 6 weeks for me to tease that out, to go, who am I? Who am I going forward now? So I had a 19-year marriage where I was somebody different with a different name. And yet our name is so important to who we are. And that 6 weeks that I took to tease that out gave me a really good grounding for going forward as the business that I have, because I've chosen to be me. I've chosen to use this name. I didn't have to, I chose it. And the imprint of, I heard somebody speaking at an event 2 years ago, and it's just completely stuck with me, and it is, whose shoulders are you standing on? And we stand on the shoulders of those that have gone before us. And I thought my maiden name, my lineage, the people in my family background, you know, some of them were interned in the war in Japan, some of them, there's lots of different things, but there's resilience, there's strength, there's courage, there's travel, there's adventure. Those are the people whose shoulders I stand on when I use this name. So that was probably a good starting point.
Beautiful. You've done such a lot of deep work on that, which is amazing. There's so much awareness. And then when you were choosing the name of the business, how did we get there?
Well, we got there because a friend and I sat in a coffee shop in Coleraine, and we bantered it about, and we looked. And it's interesting because I have noticed in the north of Ireland when I moved in that people, generally speaking, want to kind of put you in a box that they can understand you. So I'm from the south. I managed to break out of just about everybody's boxes fairly quickly. And that seems to be how I roll in life. And so whenever we were looking at Clare community coaching, there was a little bit of, well, then if you did this, you can add it under the umbrella. And if you did this. And so I started off as a divorce coach. And then I remember walking on the beach about 2 years ago. And I sort of had this thought popped into my head like it does. And it was, what if you weren't just a divorce coach? And I remember thinking, oh, stop it. Like, I haven't even got my feet under me. What? And then I thought, well, I shouldn't be surprised because I've never been pigeonholed. And I've just relaunched my new website there about 3 weeks ago. And in that, I have another offering of, are you on the receiving end of workplace bullying? Because that is the same thing as if you're in a marriage that has any element of abuse, generally not physical, but emotional abuse or financial, whatever it happens to be. So there again is another option that I can put under this umbrella. So that's kind of where it came from. Myself and a friend sitting down, just bouncing out ideas that using my name would allow me to have different sections underneath it, all under what I bring and what I do. And so, and this is the reality of that conversation.
And that's beautiful. It's, yeah, exactly. Being like, I've never been one to, be in a box, so I'm not going to continue to be in a box or put myself into a box.
I change a pattern now, yeah.
Yeah, which is beautiful. And I completely agree with that. I feel like people here especially do really like to put you in a box, and that's where you are. And it's maybe a safety mechanism for the other people so that they can understand you. But we're more than your job title. You're more than what you do. Like, that's only really scratching the surface.
Yeah, I know. And I think, some of that is a culture thing. Down south, I would say that now, I mean, I've been in the north, 29 years now, so I've been in the north a lot. But down south, there is a slightly freer culture. So let's face it, I was married to a church minister. I navigated, a church divorce. That had a whole other level of complication. So that concept of where does faith come when it comes to marriage and your vows, I have walked that journey. I have got the t-shirt, got the postcard, and it is complicated, but it is doable. And so there's another layer that I can bring to somebody else because it's not something that you hear about too often. But actually, if a relationship is broken down, whether you're Christian or not, or Muslim or whatever, doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships break down all the time. The complication with a marriage when there's faith is that shame and guilt go smack bang in the middle of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And shame will always thrive in silence.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps us small. And not for 1 second do I believe that any human being has been born to live small. So when I see people come out the other side of a divorce or a breakup or anything, I go, okay, so what's life like? Because if it doesn't have the words alive in it or colorful or good, I'm like, oh, let's look at that. Are you willing to be curious?
Mm-hmm.
Because actually we can keep our lives small, again, going back because of other people's stories. But it is that idea of how do we move from where we are to get to somewhere better? And what does better look and feel like?
Yeah. And it's what does it look and feel like? I think that's really important because sometimes we can have a vision or an idea of something within our heads, and maybe it's not actually going to make us feel the way we thought it was going to make us feel. So it's asking
Yeah.
ourselves, how do I want to feel?
Yeah, and I don't think when I look back, I don't think I was overly aware of feeling as a concept. And somebody said to me recently, do you know you use that word a lot? And I thought, I do actually, because I realize how important it is.
Yeah.
In any relationship where we don't feel okay, or we don't feel safe, or we don't feel that we can just talk about stuff, or we don't feel happy, well, why is that?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? So
Mm-hmm.
our feelings are such an important guide. I describe them as being the lights on a runway.
100%.
They're the safety lights on a runway for an airplane coming down. Every single emotion has something to tell us and show us.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll keep coming back no matter how far we stuff it down until we hear what they want to tell us, because they're showing us something that's important for us to see. And now I really do understand that. And so I tap in with my clients and go, how's that feel? Or how would you like that to feel? Because if you're not used to it, you don't actually know. So putting yourself into the imaginary world of, well, if you could have anything, how might you like to feel?
Mm-hmm.
Allows someone to dare to go to somewhere that they maybe haven't ever dared to go. And once we can feel a tiny crack of something good,
Yeah.
very hard to forget that. It imprints within us. So, for example, I was on a beach about 6 months after I left my marriage, and it was around the 12th of July, gorgeous day. I was out walking with a friend, and I had been listening to a podcast or something in the car. Couldn't tell you what it was. But I have found in my journey that I have borrowed the words of other people when I didn't know how to put words on some of the stuff for me. I still do that, actually. But I remember saying to my friend, the word that I didn't have when I was in my marriage was alive. I didn't have that. And I didn't know I didn't have it until I started to feel this sense of possibilities and this sense of space. And it's like this is real, but it was a feeling.
It was a feeling.
So we can talk ourselves into and out of everything, always. And other people can talk us into and out of everything, but our feelings are our truth. So what are your feelings telling you? Because if we lean in and go, okay, I feel sad, I feel upset, I feel lonely. Why is that? What's going on? And do I choose to honor that feeling and ask, what's the story behind it? That's when we start to find more gold in our lives.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the questions when I first met you. When we talked, you were like, what's your story? And I instantly was like, threw back, and I was like, oh my God, I find my people. I was like, that is
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like such a straight in. I was like, I had such a beautiful question. And I'm so glad that you're touching on all of that, because 100% is a feeling. And maybe if there's someone listening to this right now and they're like, yeah, I haven't felt alive in years. Maybe the job that they're working, they absolutely are not feeling alive in that. They're coming home. They're not loving their location where they're living. They're not loving the environment what they're living in. They're not loving the people who they're living with, maybe their partner, whatever it may be. Do you feel like you need to make a different choice in that to feel differently? Or how can they, because maybe something that I've explored myself is that I kept choosing a familiar hell because it felt normal. But just because it felt normal didn't mean that that was what was actually right for me and not right, aligned with what I wanted to bring. So, but for me, it wasn't until I made a different choice, put myself into a different environment, was when I actually started to feel into different feelings. So Well, I'd be curious on what your advice would be if that is someone living that reality today of, yeah, I don't really like any of this in my life, but I don't know how I quote unquote should feel.
Yeah, and so the word should
Mm.
is the same side of a coin as guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the word should, and I go, get rid of that word.
Mm-hmm.
For me, because it brings up a connotation of somebody else's something somewhere.
Yeah.
And it sort of pulls in the right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What I would usually suggest to somebody is think back to a time when you felt something good. May have been your childhood, may have been in university. Think back to what was it? And then look into the memory and go, you know, say you were in university, you were in a pub with friends. Okay, so who was around you? What was your life like? Did you like all of it? Because we don't ever like all of our lives, realistically. There's usually one or two places where it's like, yeah, well, I could do without having an upgrade and this, you know, but we can get into black and white thinking sometimes, and it's like, this is all awful. And I would go, well, is it really all awful?
Mm-hmm.
Or which of the bits that are dominating everything so you don't notice the things that aren't actually that bad? But if we can remember what feeling good feels like, we then have a reference point to look at our world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to look at our world because let's face it, you put a lobster into cold water, turn it up, it normalizes to the heat. We normalize to the environment that we're in. So if we can find a reference point that is good, healthy, solid, then we can bounce and go, okay, so in work, how am I doing in relation to this? In my home life, how am I doing in relation to this? What about the area that I live in? Because maybe you don't need to change everything. Maybe one part of your world, if something changed, would actually improve other parts. Because we do a stacking order of, well, my job is awful, my boss is dreadful, my home life has tension, and I want to live by the sea. So 3 different things. You can presume, and I have had clients that have come to me and said, my marriage is awful, I need to leave my marriage. It has been nothing to do with their marriage. When we started to uncover, it's been a family member, a parent, or a boss, or a work colleague. So I would go, so maybe it's not here. So what in this area have you got the potential to change? For financial reasons, you may not be able to change your job just like that, or leave it. But I know that when we change how we see something and how we interact with a pattern, we can change our experience of somebody even though they don't change.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, maybe we don't have to change everything and get stuck in the, oh my God, how do I do that? Maybe we can pick one area and go, if I could change something about this area, what might it be? And how do I do it? That question is good. How do I do it? A better question is, who do I know who can help? We will always get there faster with people. There's a brilliant book called Who Not How by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. And it's really, really good. It's about when we have a problem, when we align ourselves with somebody who can help, we get connection, we get support, we get validation for our world, and we can go further faster. I wouldn't be doing mad things like swimming in the sea if I didn't do it with crazy people.
Yeah.
If I was to do it on my own, I wouldn't do an awful lot of it. So people that we put ourselves around can help us. But for anybody listening, if they're noticing that their world isn't great, I would really urge you to go, is it all of your world? Or is it maybe part of your world, but it's overshadowing the rest?
Mm-hmm.
But find a memory from a time in your life where you felt happy, peaceful, free. Could be a holiday, could be Christmas, who knows what it is. But a memory where you feel safe, free, happy, and the world is good.
Mm-hmm.
And use that as a reference point and go, how am I getting on in this area of my life compared to that? Holding it with wisdom and space, knowing that time is different, but it gives the ability to look at something more objectively and to see it with different perspective. And I'm all about, let's change the perspective, because we do not have to change people. We cannot change people. And the more we try, the worse our world gets, because we get frustrated, upset, angry, disappointed, and all of those things. But we can change our experience of somebody else by changing how we choose to interact with them. That is possible. That's what my clients do.
Yeah. You choose how you show up to the interactions and who you are in the interactions.
But I think to do that, you need to very often understand what is the pattern at play. What's the dynamic? What's the pattern? It's almost like, are you in a game and nobody told you the rules? Well, if you had the rules, how would you choose to play it? And that gives you agency, and it gives you a sense of, well, actually, I normally react and say this straight away. And I would go to somebody, is that helpful? And very quickly they go, possibly not. Okay, right. So let's look at some other options. And there's lots of tools and strategies that once you've heard them, you think, that's so obvious. But things are only obvious when we hear somebody say them. But then you have to practice the muscle of trying it, because it took me a long time to find my voice in certain areas of my world, to have the confidence to go, yes, no, or choosing not to respond to that, and being okay with choosing not to respond. It's one thing not responding to a text or email. It's another thing living in your world when you've done that, going, oh, what are they going to say? What are they going to do? So there's the two sides. There's what does the action or the words look like, and what do you do internally, the noise in your head? How do you talk to yourself after you have it done? This is as important as this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bit that I didn't understand at the beginning of all this.
The integration?
Yeah, the talking to myself. So if you have an argument with somebody,
mm-hmm.
you decide to step away from the argument. So you stepped away from them verbally vomiting on you, for want of a better phrase. And that's great. You've got your agency. You've taken your power back. You've decided, no, I am worthy of not being treated and spoken to like that. I respect myself too much. I will step away. But then you go and you spend the next 2 hours in your head going, how dare they? I mean, honestly, like, do they know? So we still give our power away to that person in our head. So that section of our world deserves to be looked at too.
Absolutely. And I feel like that is so important as well, because that will eat away at our energy just as much as the circumstance,
Totally.
if not more, because, you know, we'll let these limitations of the thoughts go round and round and round and round and round. That's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, you have to notice energy.
Yes.
So we're back to that. If your world isn't great, start to become aware and notice.
Yeah.
Notice your energy. Notice what's happening. Notice how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much power in that word notice. So much ability to have choice when you are aware of something.
And it's beautiful. And I feel like that's where it really comes into trusting your gut and trusting how you feel when you're withdrawn from certain situations. But I also think it's important that we put ourselves in certain situations so that we actually know how we feel after. Because sometimes we can avoid everything because we're like, no, I'm not going to do that. But if we don't give ourselves the opportunity, you will never truly know how you feel or felt after.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is about being brave.
Yeah.
You know, it's about being brave and trying something new.
Mm-hmm.
And I am a total advocate for taking a risk. There was when I was at one of the sea swim network things, there was a gentleman there, Niall, he paints, and he had a picture, and it was no risk, no story. And I went up to him after, I was like, yeah, okay, I understand that. I've taken lots of risks, and a risk can be anything from trying to eat something new, going to a new restaurant, going to a different place on holidays, stepping out of a job, stepping out of a marriage. There's so many things that are risk. It doesn't have to be the big stuff. But without risk, there is no story. We stay where we are. And I loved what he did when he did that painting. I thought, I resonate with that completely.
Yeah, that was beautiful when he said that. I just remember that was like, that was such a mic drop. No risk, no story. Because we can play between the sidelines and if, buts, and maybes, but like if you don't put yourself forward, you're never maybe going to give yourself the chance if you don't take the risk. And yeah, you are a very intuitive woman, I feel. And what would you say to someone listening to this now to really tap into their intuition a little bit more? If they're maybe haven't been trusting their decisions, is there any small minor decisions in which they could start to make, or choose a different choice, or awareness practices to help cultivate this gut instinct a little bit more?
Yeah, there are. And again, I go back to the first starting point of that is go back to a time when you made a good decision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The easiest thing for us to do is to find something that's solid. I'm all about the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So find a moment in your life when you made a decision that you're really proud of yourself for.
Mm-hmm.
Might have been entering a competition, whatever, it doesn't really matter what it was. But find that and hold that and go, now, if I made that decision, then there is evidence that I'm a good decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
Straight away, that will cut out some of the noise in your head about, I can't make decisions, I don't know how to do this. So we can cut down some of the noise, but we cut it down with our own evidence. Because I can talk you into something and then you can talk yourself out of it. So when you have your own evidence, it's like, okay, gosh, I did actually do that. I'd forgotten about that. Did do that. So the interesting thing is with our brain will always go to find the answer to a question that we ask it. So questions become really important then. So if we're stuck in a loop of, why can't I make a decision? Our brain will find the evidence to back up why we can't make a decision and pull up all the bad decisions that you perceive you've made. So I would say, is that a helpful question? Not really. So again, we're back to noticing and awareness. So if you're in a situation and you're listening and you want to make a different decision about something, or you're trying to figure out what to do, whether it's a job, do you change, do you take a promotion, for example, and you're not quite sure, find a moment in time when you made a good decision, hold on to that and feel, what did that feel like? Then come back to the future here and go, okay, so how do I feel about this? Would I like the promotion? Would it let me feel excited, nervous, or would I really dread it? So when we start to notice our emotions, we straight away get more information. But when you do it with the evidence that you've made a good decision in the past, you're coming from a different place to do it. And the other thing that's really good to know that a lot of people don't know is that excitement and nervousness are the same emotion, same side of one coin. So you can say, God, I'm so nervous for this. And then you can also say, I feel so excited. It's that same butterfly feeling in the stomach. The words are different. They mean something different, but the feeling is actually the same. So we have an awful lot more power within us to move past things than we think we do. Another thing that I would always suggest that is really helpful is looking at something rather than doing the lists of pros and cons, because again, you can do that till the cows come home and still not make a decision. I would look and go, I asked 3 questions. So the first one is, what is the worst case scenario? If you take the promotion or if you don't. What is the best case scenario? And what is the most likely? Because in my understanding of life, if we can live with the worst case scenario, we can live with everything in between. We've taken away the biggest fear and dialed it down. Then we're in a better position to make a decision.
That's so powerful.
But I've proven it to be accurate.
Yeah.
On many an occasion.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's like, if I can handle the worst possible outcome, I can handle everything else in between. And that's absolutely beautiful. So yeah, I feel like this is a really good place to start to wrap things up. So what do you have coming up in the future? What are you excited for? Where can people find you? Fill us in.
Okay, so I've just launched my new website, as you know. So I spent a lot of time on the language. Now that I'm further into the business, I thought, oh, the first website doesn't represent me well.
Yep.
So I put in all my client experience and thought, right, who am I now? What do my clients say? What's their journey's been like? And I put that into the website. So that took a lot of time, love, effort, and tears to get that to where it is now. And I'm really proud of it, which, and I did it with a team, so that's been brilliant. I am on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I am in the process of developing, and hopefully it will be in the world very soon, a quiz, because I'm a quiz type person. And I thought, what could I bring to the world that might help people? Because as a nurse, I was always about prevention is better than cure. We always did health promotion. And I thought, okay, well, how can I bring that into my coaching? So I'm developing a quiz called Health Check Your Relationship. Identify your strengths and become aware of your weaknesses. So we're back to the word awareness. So I've designed the questions in such a way to get people to look at their lives slightly differently, or at things that they maybe haven't looked at before. So one of the questions is, how much fun do you have in your relationship? Because if things are starting to go south, fun is the first thing to go, but we don't notice that. And then if you notice it, you can go, well, what could I do to bring in something that would be fun? So it gives you agency to improve things. So I'm very excited for that, because I think if we can help ourselves to be aware of something that is going to be a potential problem, we have the ability to do something about it. And that, to me, is long before you get to a point where divorce is actually a conversation that you're having. Because you may still end up there, but you will end up there with much more agency and power in your world than a whole upset of emotions and everything is really fraught. So that's the next thing that I'm throwing out that I am excited about, because I think that would have been something that would have shed a lot of light on my life and would have been very helpful. So my hope is that people will find it helpful, and that with the information they get about themselves from it, that they will be able to look at their relationship differently and improve it in ways that they didn't know it needed. So yeah, that's where my energy is going at the moment.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's using the past things in which you would have needed and giving it to other people so that hopefully it resolves any issues that may be coming up, or gives them a little light so that they can make a different choice and bring it into their awareness.
They can have conversations about something that can lie in the deep dark corners, but then grow bigger.
Yeah.
And like everything, you can choose to ignore something, which is fine. But the thing is, and I suppose this is interesting, if you buy a white car, suddenly all you see are white cars. You're aware of it. And the point of this for me to bring to people is, if you are aware that there is a problem that is already there, the sooner you find it, the more ability you have to do something with it, the better your life will be. And that's how I want to help people going forward in that arena.
Oh, beautiful. Claire, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing all of your beautiful knowledge. I know that the listeners are going to get a lot from this. I will link your website in the show notes, and your Instagram, everything in the show notes, so everybody has easy access to you. But thank you so much for spending the morning with me, the afternoon. It has been beautiful, this conversation, and I just know that a lot of people have got a lot of value out of this. And thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's been a complete joy. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I have loved us connecting, which is great. And this is the thing I love about my life. So just before I go, I just want to sort of throw in, I did step out of an NHS pensionable permanent job. I'm a single mum with 2 boys and a mortgage. And in every single area of my life, I have felt expansion since I've made that decision. There isn't a single area of my life that hasn't expanded for the better, with space, experiences, people, knowledge, all of the above. And I wouldn't choose to go back to the life I lived now, because this is too good. It's too much. It has so much more potential for the future. And that's how we met, which I just love as well. So thank you for the opportunity to share some of my story. And I do hope it helps somebody somewhere listening to see their world in a way that's constructive and helpful.
Absolutely. And yeah, we wouldn't have the opportunity to connect, have this beautiful conversation, if you would not have made them choices back years ago. Like, it's all been pivotal points of your journey. Yeah. Thank you. And I will speak to you soon.
Absolutely. Yeah.